All right, so today we are diving into a pretty wild story, one that absolutely blew up online. It's all about the supposed arrest of Venezuela's president, Nicolás Maduro, by U.S. forces. Now, this is a narrative with some huge claims and a very, very clear point of view. So let's break it down.
So right at the heart of this whole thing is a really provocative question, right? Was this U.S. action in Venezuela an invasion? Was it an act of war? Or was it something else entirely? The source material we're digging into today, well, it has a very specific answer.
And here it is, the central argument. According to this story, this operation didn't need any approval from the U.S. Congress. Why? Because it wasn't a war against the nation of Venezuela. No. It was framed as, essentially, a police action, a targeted special op to arrest the head of a, and I quote, narco cartel. This one idea, this reframing, it's the key to understanding the entire narrative they're building. Okay, so how do they support this pretty bold claim? Well, the narrative immediately points to what it describes as a completely fractured American media. Let's take a look at how it builds this case, zeroing in on two of the biggest names in the news business.
And wow, the contrast they present is, well, it's black and white. According to this narrative, you've got the New York Times and the Washington Post reporting on the very same event, from what seems like different planets. One paper supposedly calling it illegal and a terrible idea, while the other is cheering it on as a major victory.
Digging deeper, the narrative claims the New York Times didn't just criticize the operation, it actually painted Maduro as a victim, the first victim of modern imperialism, no less. I mean, that's some really powerful language, and it's used to frame the paper as being totally sympathetic to Maduro and dead set against the mission.
And then, on the complete other side of the coin, you have the Washington Post. The narrative quotes the Post as calling the whole thing an unquestionable tactical success and a massive win for U.S. interests. The takeaway they want you to have is crystal clear. The Post was all in. So, once they've set up this idea of a divided media, the story pivots. It shifts focus to the nuts and bolts of the operation itself. And the main theme here? Incredible, unbelievable speed and efficiency. 3 hours. That's the number this narrative just hammers home over and over again. The entire mission, from the moment they started to the moment they finished, supposedly took less time than watching a feature-length movie. It's a detail that's clearly designed to paint this picture of an absolutely unstoppable American military.
And they lay it out like this perfect 3-step plan. Step 1, elite U.S. Delta Force operators drop into Venezuela. Step 2, they locate and capture Maduro, all inside that 3-hour window. And step 3, he's on a plane headed to New York to stand trial. The story presents it as just flawless, a textbook execution.
And just to really ram that point home, the narrative throws in this little anecdote from social media. Someone on X apparently joked that the entire arrest took less time than Christmas shopping. You know, it's a funny line, but it's also a really clever way to emphasize the incredible, almost casual speed of the whole mission.
Okay, so that's the what and the how, according to this story. But what about the why? This is where it gets really interesting, because the narrative is very, very clear on what this wasn't about and what it claims the real motivations were.
First things first, they go right after the most common theory you hear about any U.S. involvement in Venezuela: oil. The narrative flatly denies it. It insists the mission had absolutely nothing to do with seizing oil reserves. The argument they make is that the U.S. has plenty of its own, and besides, Venezuelan oil is just too low quality and expensive to process.
So, if it's not about the oil, then what's the deal? Well, the source lays out 3 main reasons. Number 1, to take down the drug trafficking organization that it claims Maduro was running. Number 2, as payback for Venezuela's alleged interference in the 2020 U.S. election. And number 3, a big strategic play to counter China's growing influence in the region.
So let's break down the key players here. First, to really drive home that main theme, the narrative quotes a U.S. official saying, "We are at war with a drug trafficking organization, not with Venezuela." Then it pulls China into the mix, claiming Beijing propped up Maduro's regime with a massive high-interest loan. And finally, it connects the dots back to the 2020 U.S. election, pointing the finger directly at the voting machine companies Smartmatic and Dominion. All right, now we get to what might be one of the most dramatic parts of this whole story. It's the description of what happened next, not in the halls of power, but on the streets of Venezuela itself.
I mean, the picture they paint is just one of pure, absolute joy. The source doesn't just say people were happy, it claims the entire country exploded into a nationwide festival.
It even compares the energy to winning the World Cup. It's a really powerful image.
And this narrative, it backs this up with some really vivid details. We're talking about streets jam-packed with celebrating people, folks holding up signs that say, "Thank you, Trump," and this overwhelming sense of relief from what it calls a failed state and a dictatorship. The message they're sending is unmistakable. This wasn't an invasion, it was a liberation.
And so, there you have it. A really powerful and very complete story. You've got a covert mission that's been completely reframed as a righteous arrest. You've got a media landscape that's painted as totally polarized, and you have an entire nation, supposedly, celebrating in the streets. It's a version of events that is just so different from what most mainstream sources reported. And it really leaves us with the tough question, doesn't it? When narratives about the exact same event are this divided, this black and white, how do you even begin to figure out what the truth is?